Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Patrick Millikin from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and really excited to talk to these two guys tonight. Tod Goldberg, longtime friend, author of many books. Is this kind of visible?
There you
including
There it
this
is.
absolutely killer collection, The Low Desert. Just a wonderful collection of short stories. And Tod and I had a good time chatting about it when it first came out. But we'll talk a little bit more about it tonight, of course. And Tod has agreed to help me do the heavy lifting. Tonight, we're going to both be interrogating one Dane Bahr about his really wonderful debut, The Houseboat. So gentlemen, welcome. It's great to have
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for putting this on. This is wonderful.
Yeah. For those of you watching on Facebook or YouTube, which of course is all of you, if you would like a signed copy of The Houseboat, Dane very kindly signed a bunch of them for us. And well, I won't hold it up, but I'm flying solo tonight, so I'll see if I can put a link into the comments field, but you know how to get in touch with us. Store.poisonpen.com, or drop me an email, patrick@poisonpen.com, and we would be happy to hook you up. And since it's probably going to go into a reprint fairly quickly, I would imagine, after all the raves it's getting. We talked about the rave that came from the New York Times from Sarah Weinman, our friend. So congratulations, Dane. This is really exciting.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. It's surreal. It's still, when I got the notice that the book was picked up, that I got the deal, was great. And then the whole year and a half up to publication was surreal, and talking to everybody, all the wonderful people at Counterpoint, was incredible. And it's just, yeah, it's really wild. And I got to thank you and Poison Pen for doing this, and also for sending me those books to sign. That was my very first, I got this box of books, and I opened the first one and I looked at it, and my wife was putting our 16-month-old to bed, and I went to sign my name, and I went, whoa, how do I sign my name? Like, I just completely blanked about my signature. And then my wife came out, and I got the stack of books, and our house, east of Bellingham, we had the wood stove going, and it was all nice and warm, and it was just a wild, cool experience. So thank you for making that possible.
Well, that's so cool. I didn't yet. It's nice to be your first ever book signing, kind of,
yeah,
remotely.
Yeah,
how cool
that is the coolest. I mean, you never forget that, Dane. I mean, that's the cool thing. Like, it never stops being cool to have a box of books show up at your house, and you open up and you wrote the book, and someone wants you to autograph it, like you're the lead singer of AC/DC. You're like, why am I? I'm not the lead singer of AC/DC. Why am I signing autographs?
Yeah, why did they care about? Why did they want my signature? But yeah, it's just really, it was really pretty wild. And yeah, the first, it's just, I mean, everything is a first. And I was having a conversation today with a friend, a couple of guys, Cosmo and Arvin here in Crested Butte, about just the whole, I feel like almost like at times like a child being like ushered through. I'm just kind of like, okay, yeah, we're doing this, great. And it's just, yeah, it's pretty humbling. It really is. I know a lot of people say that, but it really is.
I gotta tell you, Patrick, from the moment that Counterpoint bought Dane's book, I've been hearing about it. So my editor, Dan Spatanka, who is in charge of Counterpoint Press, we'd be talking on the phone, and he'd say, I gotta tell you about this book, The Houseboat. This guy, Dane, is the most noir thing you've ever seen in your entire life. When you read this book, Tod, you're gonna, number one, wonder, who the fuck is this guy? Where has he been hiding all this time? And then you're gonna think he's really, really troubled. And thus far, like, Dan's been 100% right, like, all the way.
Yeah. No, I made a comment earlier. We're up here at my in-laws' ranch in the Colorado Rockies, and I'm like Jack Torrance up here. It's snowing outside right now. And we went Nordic skiing today, and you had to get some exercise out because, you know, all work and no play makes Danny a dull boy.
So Todd will be like Mr. Halloran coming back at the end. Or no,
Right.
I'll be like, well, who will I be like? Danny, Red Rum, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
you're obviously Danny, Patrick. You're
Mr.
obviously.
Halloran.
I always thought he had the shining.
Oh, I had the shining. Yeah.
I taught my oldest Tor how to move his little finger and say, Tor, and say Red Rum. He'd go, Red Rum. I'm like, yeah, cool. All in jest.
Of course.
How many in horror? They all operate on the same fulcrum. It's all about the punchline. So,
and this may sound macabre to you folks watching, but it is appropriate tonight. I don't know, Todd. I thought that we would do just kind of a freewheeling discussion and both kind of throw in some comments and questions if that works for you.
Sure.
But just to kind of kick it off here, you know, I'm always looking, and I'm sure you are too, Todd, for new voices and things that are just not the same old, you know. And you know, when it was so refreshing. It's so refreshing to pick up a book like Dane's book, and immediately you're just struck with this new voice, you know. And you know, it's such an interesting combination of elements that are put together, you know, from the you know, from the way the story is told, to the setting itself, 1960 Iowa, you know, to just elements of the Gothic, of the grotesque elements, you know, of classic noir. I wrote down some notes here, and you managed to do something that I don't see very often, which is manage to combine really spare, you know, prose with very lush language, and you make it work somehow with this just beautiful natural description. So yeah, way to go, man. I mean, with this almost like Tom Waits sort of sensibility in the background, you know. Rigby reminded me of a character Tom Waits would really approve of.
Thanks.
You know what I was thinking too, Dane, is there's something in the writing that reminds me of like early Daniel Woodrow, you know.
Yes.
When Woodrow was just starting to realize, like, I can do whatever the fuck I want to do, you know. I can mix up genres, I can mix up voices, I can write in a patois if I want. So I was curious, have you read Woodrow? Is he someone that you've gone to? Was he an influence, or is he not even someone you've even looked at?
I had was it the Bayou trilogy?
Oh yeah. His Shade books, yeah.
That's the only, and I've only read a few. I didn't finish it now because I didn't like it, but I think I just kind of moved on. Some other thing was happening, but I like his stuff a lot. But I didn't set out to write a crime book or a noir, or I think the closest thing would I maybe not even like a Gothic book, but just something that just felt kind of creepily real. Like I've been a marine diesel mechanic for, I don't know, 15, 16 years. And you hang out with a lot of interesting people. And a lot of them, you know, are felons, recovering drug addicts. A lot of them are extremely, extremely wonderful, healthy people too. But you just see a lot of that. And where we live in Washington, along the Puget Sound kind of corridor, there's just this log jam of people. And I don't know if it's like that romantic kept moving west thing, but they just got blocked there and they can't go further. And because they've depleted all the resources, they can't go back. And I look at these people living in tents, you know, muttering to themselves. I look at them and I think, you know, at one point they were children and they had, you know, hope, but they made one bad decision or a bad decision here. And then they kind of steamrolled. And so that suddenly they didn't have too much to live for. And I always just thought, you know, I could, you know, anybody could turn into those people very, very quickly. So in writing this book, I just wanted to I wanted to write something dark, but I also wanted it to sound, and this sounds maybe pretentious, but you know, a literary sensibility to it, not just. I believe plot is extremely important, but I also believe that you can have plot, but you can also have a really, really nice sentence to go along with it.
Right. And that's sort of, Dane, like why I was thinking about Woodrow, because in his more like gothic crime novels, like Winter's Bone or Give Us a Kiss, you know, things like that, where he's writing with real poetry, but it's the deepest, darkest, you know, most fucked up people you've ever met, or even a book like Death of Sweet Mister, which is the most vile book I've ever loved in my entire life, which, Dane, I think you would really enjoy.
Yeah, let's go look at
Family Tale of Incest. Yeah,
a happy tale of incest. It's these small town lives that are big city horrific, you know, and that you'd think like a town that small could not contain that kind of evil or that kind of madness, but it's a town that small that actually creates that sort of thing. And that's what I saw in Houseboat, is like, these people are, the setting has begot them essentially. And that's one of the first things that drew me to your book, is like, these are creatures of this place. And these people could not live in Portland, right? These people could not live in Walla Walla. These people could only live where you put them.
Well, in the place is very important too, and nature and landscape and weather in particular is a character, I think, and it should play a role. I mean, to bring up, you know, The Shining again, the Shining wouldn't be The Shining without the snowstorm,
right,
trapping them in there. So you always have this, if you have an outside force of weather, suddenly it creates anxiety and a sense of depression or desperation in characters, and will maybe force them to do things that they otherwise wouldn't.
Right.
The river in the Houseboat is a factor in the rain that keeps falling. So yeah, the landscape has always been very important to me.
Did you always know you were going to set it in the 60s?
You know, yes. And strictly out of I don't want to say like an easy way out, but when you set it in that setting, in that era, it's not too antiquated where you can't have certain modern elements to it, but you're also not dealing with iPhones and email and things that in a way aren't necessarily romantic and can be you know, passe a few years down the road. So 1960, things that were in 1960, yes, they've gone out, but they can still be happening. You know, people still drive cars, people still drink coffee, people still go to the diner. So yeah, I've always liked that time period. And I'm not a very technological person either. I mean, I still write on and I always have Smith and Corona little manual typewriter.
Oh my gosh!
I have to transpose it into the computer, so everything just seems.
Dane, you are the noirest man alive.
Yeah, it's funny. You know, I was thinking of you mentioned some other things like I mean, there's a little bit of Twain in here. You know, there's quite a bit of Twain. And I kept thinking of, do you guys know that book Suttree by Cormac McCarthy?
Which one?
Suttree and A Child of God a little bit towards the end. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Oscar, Iowa. Is that a real town?
No.
Okay.
No. And it's you know, it's in northeast Iowa, southeast Minnesota, kind of that region where, you know, limestone, Coombs, limestone bluffs, talus slope, kind of, it's not necessarily dank, but there's a certain smell in the summertime when the humidity hits the limestone that's been baked in sun, and just has this very humus smell to it. Just smells very earthy. It's not a real town. And in fact, I mean, my whole family, my mom and dad and grandpas are all from Northeast Iowa. So I spent a lot of time there, and it's a very beautiful place. And I painted in a very dark light in the book, but anybody who lives a little bit, anybody who lives there or goes there, you'd think, oh, this doesn't seem like this at all. But I think I put a little bit of just a dark shade on it. So anybody in Northeast Iowa, hopefully don't take offense to it. I think it's a very beautiful place.
When you were growing up there, was your family big readers? Were there a lot of books in the house?
Yeah, there were always books in the house. My family, we grew up, I'm from Minnesota, so we grew up Minnesota Norwegian Lutheran. So there's a lot of music in the house and a lot of 4-part harmony. 2 of my uncles were band directors at University of Iowa State. So there's a lot of music. My dad is a very well accomplished watercolorist. We would read stories, read books, but I think it was the story that people would tell. There was a lot of people would just tell stories, and it was always I just had these very lively aunts and uncles who would just tell just these wonderful stories, and they would embellish it. I mean, I would present, just to get the feeling, the essence that they were feeling to the listener. And I think that permeated like the ability to tell just a good story. But of course, now if you write, you have to tell a good story, but you also have to make, in my opinion, the sentence, the words, you have to make it artful. I remember always during my first book that I ever read on my own was The Trench by Steve Alton. And it was about a megalodon shark that was terrorizing.
Oh, like in the Mariana Trench?
Yeah. And I liked the book, The Ways of Game Fish. It was a big illustrated book. And I just love the physical feeling of well-built books, and the smell of them. And so.
Do you remember the point at which you went from being a reader to wanting to actually create stuff? Like I have this very clear memory of in my own life. I was profoundly dyslexic as a kid, so I couldn't write until I was like 10 or 11 years old. And as soon as I was able to write, like, man, I was doing it. But do you remember the point at which you were like, oh man, I don't want to consume this. I want to create this.
Yeah, well, I to be honest, I wasn't a very big reader growing up. And like we were, thrown outside, at all seasons of the year. We skied a lot. We were outside all the time, and we'd read at night, but I wasn't a huge, reader. I remember, in Bozeman, Montana, when I went to college, I wrote a story or an essay for one of my professors, Glenn Chamberlain, whom I adore and love dearly. And it was entitled How Neil Young Ruined 2004. And it was all about this girl, and I won't name her name, but she loved Neil Young, and she loved Edward Abbey, and she loved the Monkey Wrench Gang and Desert Solitaire, and inevitably she broke my heart. And so what I do? I write this essay. Glenn thinks it's fantastic, and suddenly I'm never thought of myself as a writer, but she's saying this is very, very nice, and so that kind of planted the seed. And then I proceeded to spending like that summer hitching around the desert Southwest, trying to find the spirit of Edward Abbey to, impregnate me. Why are you so great that you can get this woman's attention? Why? So it's kind of her fault too that I'm a writer. So
you should have called me. I would have picked you up, given you a place to stay. I'm like, dude, she's not worth it. Neil Young is good, but she's not.
You would have seen me though at that, really long hair, very, very dirty, but like, oof, no.
I would have seen the writer.
Not safe.
I would have convinced my wife, like, I'm sure he's a good writer, honey. Let's stay in the guest room.
Oh.
Well, maybe can you tell us just a little bit, just broad strokes about the book itself? Maybe like an intro to the book. It's hard. We don't want to give away too many spoilers here.
There's so many. It's hard to talk about the book without giving away spoilers.
I know.
Yeah. No, yeah, the book. Well, I mean, in a way, the book does you kind of know who does it right away.
Right.
And that's what I kind of like about it. I revealed the scenario, and then why did these people become the way they became, especially Rigby. But no, the book, so Rigby is living on this dilapidated houseboat on the slough of the Mississippi River, and he kind of goes from bizarre, and then slowly through his kind of isolation on the purlieus of society. He starts to, like I said before, those, making the wrong decisions. Like he's becomes more and more insular, and in his mind, he kind of just starts to, in a sense, rationalize things as normal. And he begins to seek out companionship, I suppose. And he starts to stalk the townspeople, essentially, and certain people of the town. And when a girl is found on the side of the road, trembling and claiming her boyfriend had been murdered, all the suspicion turns toward Rigby. And Sheriff Fielding, the town sheriff, is kind of in over his head. He's kind of he's a good-hearted guy, good-natured, salt of the earth. Doesn't, kind of like Andy Griffith, doesn't carry a gun because he doesn't have to, because he's known these people his whole life. And then this starts happening. So he calls upon his friend up in Minneapolis, and this detective, Edward Ness, dealing with his own very deep-seated demons of his own. Lost his wife and young son in a petty burglary, purse snatching. He's sent down to kind of help out, and as the story kind of evolves, Rigby and Ness begin to, I would say, mirror each other, foils to one another, but both, I would say, swirling oppositely down this kind of this maelstrom until they ultimately kind of get sucked down together. And
what is so cool, Dane, is the way that you've written it, where each chapter is only like 4 pages long or shorter. Because the characters are so deeply fucked up, it seems to me like the choice to write these short chapters is an intentional one to keep the reader kind of off balance with each character, so that you don't realize that mirroring that's happening until you're really deep into it. Is that just me putting the book critic eye on it, or is that what you were trying to do?
No, that sounds pretty good. I don't know if I was intentionally trying to do that. Again, writing on a typewriter, I would kind of just limit as I was reading, I'd read the work back over to myself in my, writing shed. And it just, in my, the pacing of it, like a 3 to 4 pages just seemed like, okay, that would probably be enough for a reader to stomach. They don't want too long with it. So it's basically just kind of, 4 pages of a typewritten typescript. But I think what you're kind of feeling and sensing, a lot of that has to do with my brilliant editor. And I mean, he really is brilliant, Harry. I brought this book to him just as it was essentially a novella. It was only 30,000 words, and it was
It's a short book. I mean, it's got to be like 52,000 words, right? It's not a very long book.
Well, I think it's even shorter than that. I think it's maybe 48,000 or 49. But no, it originally was just Rigby. And Rigby started off as a very, I mean, he was weird.
Right.
But, you know, you saw him start to swirl out of control. But then Harry came in and said, it's too short. And this is a novella. But let's flesh out Ness's character. So came back with, I don't know, like 18,000 words, and he liked it. And then throughout the editorial process, you know, he was instrumental in kind of like, let's try putting this here and let's putting this here. And so it was extremely fun process to work on that. And he kind of opened up some angles that I hadn't even seen. So
that's really interesting. You know, I was just
those
going
short
to mention,
chapters are nice, and I think it helps for you know, like a page turner too. You know, if it's if you have too long of chapters, it gets a little, you know, your kids will, you know, cry out, or the dishwasher will go off, or you know, the dog will whine, and then they'll kind of get broken up. But you know, four pages, that's doable in a sitting.
Yeah, I got to start writing shorter books.
No way, your books are spot on.
No, but this is the thing, Dan. Like, I read your book and I'm like, why am I writing these novels that are 450 pages long? Like, this dude's doing it in 50,000 words. I could have so much more free time. Like, this book's great. If I write a great book and it's a third the size, like, what does it matter? I can work out. Well, I wish I could write that door stopper kind of a book that would just be very. Well, I can give you some
cool
pages. They cut plenty of them out of my books. You were gonna say something, Patrick. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, that's okay. No, one of the things I really liked and I thought was interesting about it was that in some ways that you let the townspeople tell the story too.
Yeah.
You know, with those little italicized witness observations. It reminded me a little bit of like a Winesburg, Ohio.
Yeah, the grotesques.
Yeah,
that helped move things along as well. Whenever the book, I'd kind of run into a spot like, well, shoot, you know, if something was blocked up in the timeline, or if Ness or Rigby got a little dull, and that's kind of odd to say because Sellers is not a dull dude, but those little interspersed witness sections, just for me, even it was like a palate cleanser. It kind of refocused the attention on what was really needing to happen.
Yeah, I can see that.
Let's talk a little bit deeper about Rigby himself. You know, a really interesting. His backstory, I thought was very well done, and you know, abandoned by his mom, grows up in a brothel, right? I mean, that's right? I mean, and we learned this fairly early on, folks. So that's when I mentioned the kind of the macabre sort of Tom Waits element to it. That backstory I thought was really, really cool. And he's described as kind of a nebbish in some ways, you know, sort of a worm-like character. You know, I kept thinking of a little bit of a touch of Boo Radley, you know, characters like that. And in his interactions, I don't know, what did you think, Todd? I thought the way he spoke was oddly satisfying.
Yeah.
You know, just kind of like no bullshit and you know, fairly coarse, but some of those scenes with him engaging with the public, there was something satisfying about them.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I was thinking also of Tom Franklin's Crooked Letter,
Sure.
and the quasi villain in that, who turns out not to be the villain. I just ruined Crooked Letter for anyone who's listening.
Sorry, Tom.
sorry, Tom. Everyone's gonna have to return the 13 million copies you sold. Like Tod Goldberg fucked it up. But yeah, I think a character like Rigby, for me, the reason I enjoy reading him and why it must have been a lot of fun to write him from Dane's side is, he's a wild card because you don't quite know what he's going to say or do. And he's really competent at his life. And these other people don't have any sense of what that might possibly entail. And so it's always fun to watch a person like that sort of interact with the real world. When it's done really well, it's like in Dane's book. And then sometimes you see it in a book or in a TV show or a movie, and it's like that character is a space alien. And here's a good example, actually. Is anyone watching or listening? Like in the TV show Reacher now, Reacher himself is like, it's like he's not a human being. It's like literally he's been dropped out of space and has never talked to another person before, which is fun to watch, but he's also just like this giant, creeping figure. Whereas in Dane's book, it's like he's superhuman. Like you recognize all the foibles of humanity in one guy. And I really like to read that. It's fun. And I know that to write that is fun because, like Dane was saying, you might get bored with it, but the reader's never getting bored with it because you never know where he's going to go or what he's going to do.
Yeah, he was the kind of character where I assume most people, not, you don't even have to be a writer, but most people, they're like, there's that little voice that would love just to take it just a little bit further in a conversation and just say wrong things, say damning things, say things that you can never back out of.
Right.
And a normal human being in society doesn't say that. But with a person like Rigby, who doesn't want to explore like that kind of that darker side, that can say things to people, who can literally start to be boiled down to a primordial kind of being and still be living in a modern era.
Right.
I think Tod brings up a really good point that you just spoke about too, is that that character could easily have been kind of out of central casting. You know what I mean? Sort of this Boo Radley kind of character who's silent and we don't really see, but we've all met, well, maybe some of us haven't, but we come across people that aren't exactly like Rigby, but you observe interactions in life with people that are just kind of, he could be irritating, a presence. I think that really adds so much more to him. It makes, as what Tod was saying. And there's go ahead.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of, in my, not so much anymore, but would hitchhike a lot, and I'd pick up hitchhikers, and I mean there is a certain group of people in the world that only pick up hitchhikers and that hitchhike, and you can really see some very strange, unsettling behavior when you're sitting in the passenger seat of a car and a guy is high on something, and you're sitting on a stack of
company.
You're sitting on a stack of newspapers, and there's an acrid smell in the air. You're just like, oh, okay, let's make it to the next stop. This maybe was a bad idea. But
Dane, you just described an essay that I've not yet written that I'd like to, called "Things Jews Don't Do." Pick up fucking hitchhikers, number one. Hitchhike is number two.
that would be a good essay. You should write.
I should write that. Things Jews don't do.
Can you fit that into your work in progress somehow?
I actually probably could.
Little anecdote.
It's a little
So I was
list.
talking to this real wild man, Dane, and he gave me a really good idea for this essay. I'm going to do everything. I'm not going to do everything Dane does.
Yeah, see, we should tour together, Dane. And you could just be like, and then I did this, and I did this, and I was like, I've done none of that.
And
I will
won't,
never
and
do
I
any
won't
of
do it. I will never do that.
My wife and I were watching Gravity, that Sandra Bullock movie where they're out in space.
Yeah.
And I was getting like filled with anxiety when like the space stuff was hitting the ship and
Yeah.
people are plummeting out. And I'm like, oh my God, this is freaking me out. And I turned to my wife and I'm like, why aren't you filled with anxiety? Why aren't you freaking out? And she was like, I'm never going to be in space. And I was like, huh. Like, this is nothing I need to worry about. I will never, ever be in space.
The logic is impeccable, right?
Yeah. And I was like, that's a great way of not getting anxious.
It really is.
Oh, I like that.
You were a few minutes ago, Dane, you were talking about this sort of maelstrom, and I want to go back a little bit to your day gig. I'm not sure if you still do it now that you're a rich and successful author who has sold his movie rights. I hope probably not.
Yeah, not yet. They're still available out there for anybody who wants to.
I could adapt this in a night.
Oh man,
I'd love that.
They would be so good. But you talked about your gig as a diesel mechanic, marine diesel mechanic, and obviously the river, and we talked about it a little bit earlier. Nature forms a big part of the story in this book, and it's you talk about it it's in the background a lot, just the cycle of life and death. It's not noir by definition, it just is. And then the river and the storm coming. There's just so much rich material for us to get into. And then there's a quote that I wanted to ask you about, which was refers to this particular community: a dry year will scare you to death and a wet year will kill you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think in any rural community that is close to a river, especially if it's agricultural, it's if the rains don't come, then your crops aren't going to grow and you're not going to have your livelihood. But once that river breaks its banks, then who cares about your crops at that moment, because your house is being inundated and all your belongings are being carried away, and you're trying to get your family to higher ground.
When the levee breaks.
Up in this November, up where we live, we got these atmospheric rivers, they're calling them, and we got 15 inches of rain in six days, and it totally flooded all the mountains. So it's just all this sediment just came rushing down the mountains, flooded the Nooksack River. And me and the boys, Father of the Year award, all this flooding is going on. And I'm like, boys, come on, load up in the truck. Let's go on a flood adventure. So put them in the back seat, and we're driving around, out in the county.
More things Jews don't do.
Yeah, that's number 3. We got to this one part where we kind of turned this road on this state route and heading toward Mount Baker ski area. And usually, you see all these big mountains, the North Cascades, and you see there's a winery on the north side, there's berry farms on the south, and it was just this sea of water, and it was just we've never seen anything like it. It's just unbelievable. The flood stage was 33 feet or something like that, and it was just people were getting stuck in their cars and drowning. And then just earlier this summer we had this heat dome thing that little Lytton, BC, just to the north of us, burned up because of fire, because it was 120 degrees in BC, which is unheard of. So it's just, nature has a way of ruling out any rebellion that you seem to impose on your life or somebody else's. Nature has a very deft way of just putting a stop to all of that. And that is, I think, just in my mind, it's scarier than, and more suspenseful than any, character or book or movie that could be put out.
Yeah. Let's talk. I realize the time's getting away from us here a little bit, and I don't want to neglect talking about Tod's work, of course. Sorry, Tod. We've on the whole almost the whole hour.
Dane's book is new.
That's true. Yeah, but for those of you who have not read the Low Desert, tell us a little bit about it. It's about a very specific part of California. Just have you read it, Dane?
The Low Desert?
Yeah.
Halfway through. Apologies, Tod. Halfway through.
Do we need to take a break?
Not to put you on the spot there, Dane. It's got clowns. It's got the Salton Sea. It's just an amazing.
No, it's
collection.
great. It's good. It's very good.
Thank you. Yeah. So the majority of the stories take place in the same desert Southwest that Dane was hitchhiking through, and in fact, like what Dane sort of talks about, like he would have fit in as a character in one of these stories. Like I could see one of my characters picking a guy up and saying, "The fuck you doing walking around here?" It's like, well, in 2004, Neil Young ruined my life. I'm like, all right, now we've got a story.
Take me to Palmdale.
Yeah.
Palmdale.
We're gonna drive to Palmdale real slow. But it's a story, it's a collection of stories that take place in and around the resort cities of Palm Springs and then out towards Vegas and Arizona. And it's, it's about people sort of on the edge of criminality or long past it. And some of the stories are tied into the larger universe of my Gangsterland novels. And all of the stories in this book are interconnected, and sometimes in subtle ways and sometimes in not so subtle ways. But for the most part, the collection itself is also sort of me examining what brings people to the point of violence, what brings people to the point where they'll do the things that Jews don't do. And it's, it's another in a series of books I've written that I think takes a look at why people do terrible things to each other. And in this case, it has a lot to do with nature too. What Dane was talking about with the floods, it's sort of the reverse of what happens in the desert. I was just talking about this last night at another event, that the desert is always trying to kill you. The desert, we weren't supposed to live here. And you wake up in the morning and there's a scorpion in your house. That's not a sign of good luck. That's a sign that nature wants you gone quickly. We just got a new puppy, and I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning because I heard the coyotes in our backyard. And I was like, this is not a place for people to live with a small fluffy animal that might run outside at some point. Why do I live in this place? So the stories are about those things, and they're also about my normal obsessions with gangsters and criminals and criminal clowns. I have to tell you, Patrick, about the criminal clown. I had a run-in with him recently.
Oh no.
So,
oh no.
So there's a story in the Low Desert called the Royal Californian that has a clown in it named Hermie the Clown. And Hermie the Clown is based on a this is a weird sentence, based on a local clown called Harpo, who shows up just in bars and restaurants inexplicably and will take pictures with people and then leave. So in December, I was out to dinner here in the desert with Dan Smetanka, the editor-in-chief of Counterpoint Press, the Dane and my corporate overlord. And we were at dinner, and I had my back to the front door of this restaurant, and Dan was sitting across from me, and Dan starts saying this, Tod, 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 Tod. And I'm like, oh my God. He's like, do you smell burning toast? What's happening? And he's like, clown, clown, clown. And I turn and I look, and walking into the restaurant is Harpo the clown.
Holy shit.
And I'm like,
Did
well,
you
this
get
is
it on video surreptitiously.
there are photos on the internet, and I'm like, oh my God, this is not a good sign, because I had a sense that because of all the press around the book that he had gotten word that I had based a character on him. So he walks in and everyone's freaking out because a clown just walked into a restaurant at, and like the locals don't know what's going on. The tourists are like, why the fuck is there a clown in this restaurant? And so he comes back out of the restaurant. We were actually sitting outside, and I walk up to him. I'm like, hey, can we get some pictures? He's like, yeah. Well, except he doesn't speak. So he says, so we take a bunch of photos with him. And I say to him, hey, do you recognize me? And he says, no, but he doesn't say it. He just shakes his head because he doesn't speak. And I was like, well, we have a mutual friend, Dean, who's our mutual friend. And he says, oh. And then he looks at me and he says, he mouths, are you the writer? And I said, I am the writer. And he said, he mouths again, Tod. And I said, Tod. And I said, I've been trying to make you famous. Every interview that I do, I tell people about you and about this weird job you have. And he gets fucking pissed. He had handed me like a little flyer for whatever it is, clown business he does. He rips it out of my hand and he starts stalking away. And Dan Smetanka from Counterpoint Press says, excuse me, can we get another photo? And the clown just turns and looks at him, gives him a stare that would kill an elephant if we were at the carnival, and stalks away. And I was like, that is a clown that is very angry with me.
Oh my God, it's the best story I've ever heard in my life. I thought you were going to say you got close and you could tell it was actually Lee Goldberg in clown makeup.
that I would believe. He's very angry about the press.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Didn't you say there were a couple of itinerant clowns in your area?
Yeah, there's him.
Yeah.
And then there's a person who dresses up like Charlie Chaplin who does clown business in town.
A tramp kind of thing.
A tramp, yeah, a silent clown. And they're all silent. None of these clowns talk. It's very disconcerting. Dane, when we're done with this conversation, Dane, Google Harpo the Clown Palm Springs, and
I will.
And maybe Google my name at the same time, and you'll see.
Shit, I'm doing it right now.
But you'll see a photo of Harpo for sure pop up. So I don't know what got us clowning again, but it plays a very large role in the low desert.
Man, no run-ins with him since.
Well, so
He doesn't try to contact you.
So it turns out he's been hanging out a lot at this one restaurant. So he has like a circuit that he's on. There's a restaurant in town called The Nest, which is where like HPV was first created. It's just the worst place on earth. It's like a senior citizen hookup joint, and he goes there like Thursday nights. Like that's his spot. And it turns out like Wednesday nights he goes to this place called Kitchen 86 where we were dining. And so the other night my wife and I were there with my cousin Lee, who the last time she was in town we ran into that fucking clown also. And I was like, hey, before we eat here, I need to know if the clown has been here. And so I say to the hostess, has the clown been here yet tonight? And she was like, oh, he's been coming in on Fridays now. And I was like, cool. Because I can't be having him ruining my dinners.
You're the best thing that's ever happened to those clowns, right? I mean, come in here, see the clown.
It's a very weird town. So the Coachella Valley, it never floods, but we do have two clowns.
There's too much sun. You're getting too much sun.
We have
Sounds bad for you.
an influx of vitamin D is no good for anybody.
No, it makes you overly confident.
But keeps you from having rickets.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Just this
Yeah.
idea, you know, of this strata of society somewhere out there that exists on the margin, you know, out in these Indian reservation casinos, and
Right.
it's fascinating because, of course, we've got them here all over the place too.
Todd, did you always want to write when your first writings that you got published, or even before you got published, was it all with a crime bent to it?
Most of the time, yeah. I mean, I sort of started out thinking I wanted to write whatever literary fiction is, because, you know, I'd sort of been weaned on in college on, like, you know, Richard Ford and Tim O'Brien and writers like that. But I had always grown up reading crime fiction. So crime fiction was sort of my young adult fiction. Like, that was what I read when I was 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, like Mac Bolan and stuff like that, but also Elmore Leonard. But, you know, it was a little different for me because my brother published his first book when he was 19 or 20 years old. And so by the time, you know, I was trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do, my brother Lee had already published, like,
This is your much older, younger, or
my much older brother Lee, significantly older.
Aren't you guys twins?
How dare you?
How dare you?
Man is 9 years older than me. He's never had skin that looked this good. But he was already writing crime fiction and sort of showed me, like, oh, like, this is a real path that you could take. But you know, everything that I had written when I was a kid always involved at some point someone with a gun or, you know, blowing something up. And you know, it was only when I was younger and felt sort of like the pressure, because I was writing short stories to start with, of writing literary fiction to sell it to Glimmer Train or whatever, that I felt like I couldn't write what I wanted to write, that I had to write, you know, sad stories about my mom or whatever. But once I had published probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 short stories, I really just started to write mostly stories that had some sort of crime element in it. And then by the time my first book came out, it was, you know, it was basically a noir novel. I just didn't know it. And I've always sort of, you know, I've written literary crime, I think, earlier in my career. And then in about 2007, I just sort of decided, like, you know what, fuck this. I'm just going to actually write the books I want to write, which are dark comic noir novels. Like, that's just what I'm going to do. And at the same time, I had just gotten hired to write Burn Notice, turn the television show Burn Notice into a series of novels. And that's sort of what taught me how to be a crime writer, was doing that job. So yeah, I mean, I've wanted to write my entire life. The only other job I ever really wanted was to play first base for the Oakland A's. And if I had gotten that job, I'd currently be living in Atlanta, since they just traded their first baseman.
Yeah.
Wow. And so I remember when Lead Girl came out. That was what, God, when was that? Was that early
2002.
2002, right? And didn't you do a couple of projects with Brad Meltzer?
Yeah, I did. I did that book right there, The House of Secrets with Brad. And you know, Brad and I wanted to do more of those books, but we both sort of had the champagne problem of success. And I haven't had the time to write a book with him, and he hasn't had the time to write a book with me, because of all the other projects that we've been doing. I mean, the great thing about the success of Gangsterland and this series of novels I've written for Counterpoint along with The Low Desert, you know, it's been a tremendous success. We've sold a lot of books, and that's been great, but it's also fulfilled sort of all of my artistic desires too. And that's a great feeling. I mean, it's a great feeling for you too, Dane, because if you stay with one publisher for a while that has your back, and really supports you, you'll sell your books, you'll make your money, you'll be happy. And there's a real value in knowing that you have a publisher who cares about you and supports you.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I haven't been able to write another book with Brad because he's in the same position. He's got a publisher who loves and supports him, and he's been turning out books and the children's books at the same time, and we haven't had the time to write the sequel to the House of Secrets, but that character still lives in my head, and every now and then she sort of pops up in my mind, and I think, oh, I should probably write another one of those books with Brad. That was fun.
I was just going to ask quickly, what about have you, Tod, sold the film rights for the Gangsterland or for Low Desert? I mean, those would make a killer.
Yeah, so Gangsterland, we were working on the TV show version of it for Amazon, basically for 2 years. We have a great team, and I'd tell you all exactly who was working on it with me, but not really allowed to, except it rhymes with the showrunner of Bosch. And then Amazon ended up at the end of this last year deciding not to go forward with it. But we were so far into the development of Gangsterland as a TV show that we were looking at casting already. And then, this is how it happens. You'll get far along, and then eventually someone says no, and that's that. But we've got a great team that's still involved with it, and we're going to go back out to the market probably when I'm close to being done with this last book, so that we can go sell the whole thing. I mean, this is the thing is that we hadn't, there was no end yet. No one knew how the books were going to end, and so they were just always buying it on the premise of the hitman who hides out as a rabbi. And now we have an ending for it, or we do if I can get from page 200 where I am today to page 450. God damn it, because I don't write Dane's books. Sometime this summer and be done with it. And then the Low Desert, the short story, the Low Desert, I'm turning that into a novel called Salt and Sea for Counterpoint, which will come out in 2025. And I just adapted the story into a pilot. So we've been working on that, and I've been working on an adaptation also of Goon Number 4 from the Low Desert. It's complicated though. The stories in the Low Desert, a lot of them are connected to the Gangsterland books.
Yeah. And
so you can't sort of separate them out from the story collection and just sell them as their own thing, except for the Low Desert and Goon Number 4. So I wanted to work on those things on my own, and see if we could sell them. We had tons and tons of interest around stuff, but I decided, like, you know what, I want to try a couple of these things on my own, see what happens.
Now, are you still teaching as well?
I am. I after this, I swear to God, if you're watching it and you're a student of mine, you're going to get notes on your final projects. Yeah, I direct the MFA program at UC Riverside, and that's a big full-time job. I've got 100 MFA students. I've got 15 faculty members. I've got a staff. It's like a real thing where, like, they entrust me with the money, and then they entrust me with, like, the future of the students, and, like, the academic integrity of the University of California rests in my lap.
We're doomed.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I got this job, but I've had it for 15 years now, and
just let the TAs do all the work.
Yeah, I think I got him really bamboozled.
I don't know why the hell you're taking time to talk to me. This is like an overwhelming amount of stuff you're doing.
It's like, a lot, Dane, and you owe me some money for that.
My essay, Things Jews Do. Everything. And well, apparently. My God.
Well, the thing about teaching creative writing and running an MFA program is I'd always wanted to be a professor. Like that was from the start. Like I wanted to be in Dead Poets Society. Basically, I wanted to have control over the minds of the youth.
Seize the day.
And I wanted them to have an inordinate amount of respect for me, because I could quote poetry. And so, I had been a professor since 2000. And then in 2007, when I got the opportunity to create my own MFA program, it became a much larger thing. And it might have affected my prolific quality of writing. I don't know. I mean, I put out a book every 18 months, so maybe not.
Yeah, that's a huge output.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
And for the quality too of your writing is,
Yeah,
it's an achievement.
thank you. And so maybe like the teaching stopped me from, writing more screenplays, or the teaching stopped me from, writing more essays or something. But I find it so gratifying. And, so many of the students that I've worked with who've come through the program have been such huge successes. I don't have kids, but I've got 500 students who graduated from my MFA program in the last 15 years. And man, I am so proud of them and the work that they do. And, it fills me with a kind of joy that you don't get from most jobs.
Yeah. I was just
Did
gonna say,
you?
go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
No, I was just gonna say there was a question that came in on the YouTubes. How do you balance, Tod, all that stuff? Writing, reviewing, teaching. Do you have to be very disciplined about your day and put aside specific time, etc.?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like I in fact have a book review due tomorrow for USA Today. So I'm also a book critic at USA Today.
What are you reviewing?
I am reviewing Don't Know Tough by Eli Craner. And I'll give you a preview of it. It's fucking great. And actually it was in the same review that Dane's in the New York Times.
Yeah.
Great book, great debut, really fantastic novel. And I found that like I can't write fiction on the same day that I'm working on a screenplay, but I can write nonfiction on the same day that I'm writing journalism. So I really have to bifurcate my time. And then, I have to devote X number of days or hours per week to the reading of my student work, the meeting with my students. Today I had a Zoom meeting with a prospective student. Tomorrow I'm going to meet with current students. These are constant things. What I will tell you is that technology has been a great help. The ability to be on Zoom, just like we're doing this right now, but meet with my students and have a one-on-one meeting with them and talk about their work, I think is almost better for both of us than me just writing up notes on, why the story works or doesn't work. Having a productive sort of production meeting about a work, I think is a better use of all of our time. And so I've changed the way I teach over the years also because of limitations on my time. But if I am half-assing any of these jobs, it shows up immediately. Like I can't half-ass it, any of that stuff. And so when I'm doing that one thing, it has my full attention. Likewise, when I'm in the other room and I'm watching football, it has my full attention. And don't text me. I don't want to talk to you.
Do you ever suffer from burnout?
No.
Because you're
no. My narcissism. Yeah. My narcissism is such, Patrick, that I'm really prevented from it. Where it shows up, of course, is I would like to have more free time to spend with my wife. I'd like to go on longer vacations and do more stuff. But this champagne problem that I mentioned before of having books due all the time, like it's hard to complain about an audience wanting the thing that I would like to do, and so for instance, when I sold The Salton Sea to Counterpoint, I hadn't written the book yet, but I had this short story and I was like, this is what I want to do next. I really have this vision for maybe 3 more books, knowing that, honestly, that's going to take me till I'm 60 years old to complete. And I was like, Jesus Christ, I just planned out the next 9 years of my life. That's a weird feeling to have. It also reminds me that I have got to get a colonoscopy. I've got it.
I know, man, me too.
Something important.
I know. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Great way to close.
Let's end on the colonoscopy. Yeah. Well, Dane, colonoscopy. How am I going to make this segue? Tell us a little bit about what you're working on now, Dane. Have you started a new book or?
Yeah. I try to. I'm kind of in the boat of Tod, where keep working and keep active and don't get stagnant and don't try not to dwell on, like, it's Harry keeps telling me, like, enjoy this publication, enjoy what's happening right now, because, it's your first and this is great. And just enjoy it. But I have the mentality of such that I'd like to just keep, and again, I think it is a degree of narcissism, really, truly, that keeps you wanting to do things. Otherwise you would just write in a journal or not do it at all. And so you want people to listen to you and read your stuff. And so, I sent a manuscript to Harry, and he got some notes back to me, and I sent it back to him. He liked it. So we're going to do a nice slow read through. It's very different than the Houseboat. It's not, it's quite different, but I got the first.
Zero mannequins.
There are zero mannequins. Yeah. The working title is Glass Houses. But I finished the during my paternity leave with our second Anders. I got the first draft of the sequel to The Houseboat done, and I told Smetanka that it's going to make The Houseboat look like lowbrow comedy. So it's dark.
How much darker could it be?
I know. My grandma, and she's such a sweet, both my grandmas are such sweet women, but my maternal grandmother in particular, she always comes up to me and, like, she'll grab my shoulder and say, why can't you just write something happy? You come from a happy family. And I'm like, I'd love to, but yeah.
Get used to that. I mean, all of my mothers and grandparents are dead now, but that was the common theme would be, why can't you write something happy?
You're not.
Why did you fuck me up?
They're really looking for, is it a reflection on me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What did I do wrong to make you have this worldview?
You are the reason I'm in therapy and I'm writing these books.
They did nothing wrong. They're great people. Great family. But yeah, it's gonna be it's a fun one. So we'll see. Hopefully somebody likes it.
Do you have a tentative title for it? It's not called
it's called Stag. Yeah.
Like it.
You didn't want to call it Still Houseboatin'?
Or maybe as my brother-in-law calls it, the boat hole. maybe that
to the reckoning.
The reckoning. The boat holier, the bitter end.
Well, guys, it's been so much fun. Thanks for spending the hour talking with me. Congratulations.
Oh, man,
congratulations, Dane.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for doing this. And Tod, thanks for reading it and giving it your endorsement and doing this. It's been great, man.
Oh, do you mean this one right here?
That one. Second down the
what's up with, they put Ivy above me? What's up with that?
She's cuter than you are, Tod.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, she is. Yeah.
It's funny, there was talk about they suggested bringing Ivy aboard tonight, and I hope she's not miffed, because I love Ivy, and she would have been great, but
she is surely not miffed. I just talked to her yesterday. She had no words of miffness.
No miffed. Good. Yeah.
There was no miffing.
Yeah.
She's the coolest and an amazing writer, and look forward to seeing what she comes up with too.
Yeah, she's got a new book. I think she just finished, so it'll be a busy year. Ivy and I went to grad school together, so we're old friends.
Well, when I get down to Scottsdale, Arizona, Patrick, I'm gonna look you up. Yeah. And if ever I'm thumbing it through the desert stuff. Where do you live? Palm Springs? Is that where it is?
Yeah. So next time you're hitchhiking through, you stop by my house. We'll feed you with the rest of the tramps out back.
Find a couple of clowns somewhere.
I'll show up with Harpo. I'll be his translator. What was that, Harpo? He's still mad at you. That's Harpo. Yeah, it'd be great though to meet you in person.
Yes, well, it's a
Absolutely.
plan. It is a plan, sir.
All right, gentlemen, have a great night.
Yeah,
And,
thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching. Take
Yeah,
care, everyone.
Absolutely.
Take
Yeah,
care.
happy reading.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.